Welcome back to, let's see, Tuesday's TED Talk, all right? Edible landscape is what we're talking about. This is what I want you to zero in on, the harvest, okay? We talked about seasons a little bit. We're gonna talk more about that. And you'll notice the melons, the figs, the grapes, the tomatoes. Fortunately, here in the Mayer area, we live in the ideal location to have the best of both worlds, all right? I'll go down to Phoenix and get plants, bring them up, so I can get my summer crop started in February in a protected environment. I built a greenhouse, but before I had the greenhouse, I was still doing this, bring them up, put them in the garage at night so they don't freeze, take them out in the daytime so they could be in the sun. But I was able to get them started in February because you cannot buy these kind of plants up in Prescott Valley, all right, in February because they're not gonna work. And so, but here we can start there, we can extend the growing season. I've had tomatoes blooming or fruiting into December, all right? And you can buy things up in Prescott Valley that are suitable for higher elevation, all right, some of the fruit trees. Now, the important thing to remember, I mentioned the level of knowledge at a nursery. Some of the nurseries are not very well provided with information about the cold requirement. Most of these fruit trees, the pears, the peaches, the plums, the apricots, the apples, they have a cold requirement. It has to have a certain number of hours of temperature, usually below 40 degrees, and it could be 700 hours, it could be 400 hours, okay? If you're gonna buy a plant like that in Prescott Valley, it'll often have a 700-hour requirement, which will work great over there. It will not work here. We're not gonna have a 700 hours of enough cold. Now, down in Phoenix, it should have a lower cold requirement that will work up here. Okay, so you have to pay attention, and if they don't know, you're gonna have to press it, you're gonna have to ask. The other thing, okay, and I've worked with the Arboretum in Superior because they're a little higher elevation. You can get plants there that are less likely to be found in some of the other commercial nurseries, like blueberry elder. They will have plants like the turkey brown fig that I got, okay? And so my question is, the pollination requirement for turkey brown fig, wasps, there's specific pollination biology. If you don't have wasps, you don't have the right pollinator, you're not gonna get any fruit. You're wasting your time. All right, so most of the plants today, these fruit trees, they don't need pollinators anymore. They're self-fruiting. Make sure that the person's telling you or the tag is telling you that this fruit tree will bear fruit without the pollinator even being necessary. It's not to put bees out of business, but you're not going to have to rely on them. I know someone in Prescott Valley who goes around with a Q-tip pollinating his peach tree. Okay, you don't want to do that. That's not worthwhile or necessary. Okay, all right. Let's go on. We started talking about water last time, okay? So we're going to continue to talk about that. What's missing in the soil besides water, and that is going to affect the water balance in the soil? Organic matter, all right? Desert, arid land soils are relatively fine when it comes to nutrients, okay? Iron and nitrogen and potassium and sodium, or not sodium, but other things, okay? Zinc, etc. But oftentimes the pH is higher, which means that those nutrients are difficult for the plant to absorb. So oftentimes lowering the pH helps the plant to absorb those nutrients. You can do that with some chelating agents. Organic matter itself helps not just to make nutrients more slowly available, but also it retains moisture. So the big thing that we're missing in arid land soils is organic matter. So you're going to need to add mulching, manure, something that's going to put plant matter into your soil. It's very important. Retaining moisture is the biggest part of that. The other thing that I'll routinely add is gypsum. okay? Gypsum is a salt, okay? It's calcium sulfate, all right? So calcium, important nutrient. Sodium, not an important nutrient. When you put gypsum in the soil, it's gonna swap out, gonna push out the sodium and make calcium there. When you have sodium salt in the soil, it's gonna tighten it up, and down the desert, in a lot of floodplains, you end up with a hard pan called caliche. We don't really have too much of that up here, but you can still get soils that are very tight and resistant to water infiltration. And when you put in gypsum and you push out the sodium and you have calcium there, the soils are more loose and easier to work with, okay? And roots and organisms, earthworms, and like being able to move around in there. And so gypsum is important to add, okay, to your soils. Now, containers, okay? You'll notice, and I had the blackberry there earlier, where I put, this is actually a tomato growing here in a can that's just hanging from my patio. But over here is a can where I put in the blackberry stem that's just spreading, and it'll root, then I'll cut it off, and then I'll transplant that and get another one established somewhere else, and I spread several around doing that. Okay, I tried blueberries. Some plants are just not going to be worth the effort. Okay, blueberries require a very high acidic soil, which is just not what we have here. So I put it in just mulch, but you may even have to add it acid, you know, like a muriatic, almost like a pool acid that they will make for a gardening soil environment to reduce the pH, to make the nutrients available. Serviceberry, which I mentioned growing with my walnut tree, are very much like blueberries, but that's a shrub, and it's a little bit higher elevation foresty, but it's obviously I've been able to get it to be successful here, and it's a fruit that's like a blueberry. So I would suggest you explore options, and if you really like blueberries, serviceberries are going to be a viable substitute. The blueberries are just going to be so very difficult to have produced. So you may get them to live, but it doesn't mean that they're going to produce the fruit that you're after, and that's the thing. All right, these are sweet potatoes that are in this container here, and that's what I've got growing in containers. You can grow sweet potatoes in the soil, in your raised bed, but it's easier to harvest them when they're in a container, okay? So that's some other factors, and it's easier also to control the soil that you're putting in there, again, a high organic matter, easier to work with, and to harvest ultimately the potatoes when it's time. Seasonality. All right, limits. Let's see if I have a picture. Okay, I have a picture right here. Okay, so golden current, okay, water catchment. The water is falling on the roof. Catch it if you can. All right, and I have several rain barrels. I could actually use some more. And they don't catch a lot, but they do catch something, and then you can put that back into your landscape in a controlled, managed, sustainable fashion instead of it just running off doing it anytime. You decide when it's best. Okay, golden currant, native, Lynx Lake. I've hiked around there and I've seen this. Oh, cool, yellow flowers, purplish fruit, a little bit like a blueberry, not quite as sweet, a little larger seed, but anyway, it's edible. Okay, and you could cook it and use it like a blueberry or serviceberry. But in Mayer, even though it's a afternoon shade environment like at Prescott Valley Library, which has a big bunch of these growing wildly successful, I could not get it to produce any fruit. It's just too hot here. So you may be able to get things to survive and to do its thing, but not to thrive and produce the edible portion. So just understand, and there's so much out there to pick from, but you need to be aware of what's available and that there's golden currant. And that's why I'll be talking about native plants that you're going to encounter on a hike. And then you'll see it. Oh, well, maybe that's manzanita, for example. Okay, edible fruits on the manzanita. And you can go to a native or arid land xeriscape part of a nursery and oftentimes find manzanita. Now I've got manzanita growing, but it has never produced a fruit, even though it's in fruit not too far away from Mayer. Some other things that I purchased, wolfberry from the lower desert, hackberry, desert hackberry, okay? And I cannot get mine to fruit. I don't know why. There is a hackberry on Black Mesa east of, used to be there, east of Sunset Point. Had a recent fire there. And there was so much fruit on that one shrub, 6 feet tall, it was covered in orange fruits. And I just don't know why mine is not bearing fruit. So it doesn't work. I'll end up replacing it, putting something else in there. The other advantage to some of these spiny fruits, shrubs, wolfberry, barberry, hackberry, along a perimeter of a fence line is an added security function. Okay, things are less likely to come over your fence when there's a bunch of spines and thorns sitting there. And if you can eat the plant, like prickly pear, along with it serving a security function, then it's a win-win situation. My neighbor, when I moved in there and put in some almond trees, I think Danielle said this earlier, how pretty. Okay, I don't really focus on the pretty. I want to be able to eat it, okay? It'll look pretty though too, and the pollinators will love it. The bees will be there, and the hummingbirds, etc. Okay, and all those are just added benefits. And oftentimes you'll be growing plants that are going to be pretty anyway, but you might as well grow a pretty plant that you can also eat. All right, I want to mention a little bit about delivery methods of water. Now, a fence is a dead thing, but when you grow the blackberries on it, which I have moved, transplanted like I had said, it's now a living thing, and it's a fruit-bearing thing as well. You'll notice this riparian zone. So I have created a riparian zone with an apple tree, 2 cherry trees, a choke cherry, and a pear tree growing along this rocky riverbed, and it's a gravity flow. Often there's 2 different kinds of people in the world. Hosers, me, I drag a hose around. Drippers, my brother, installs drip lines, okay? Understand when you install a drip line, that's a very efficient, targeted water dispersal mechanism, water delivery means. However, it's not static. You have to eventually adjust it and move it as the plants, the canopy grows, and so forth. The thing that I like, going back to lifestyle, when I'm out there watering my garden, who joins me? Hummingbirds, bzzz, flying through the water. Lizards scurrying around. For me, that's an important aspect of my lifestyle to enjoy doing this in a broader fashion, not just harvesting the plant. So gravity, feed on the water, hose, drip, you've got to decide what's going to work for you. Lifestyle. Thanks. We'll see you again on Tuesday. Bye.